Hello, I'm Toycat, and today I wanted to talk about democracy, because did you know there have never been elections held on the moon? And that is technically a true fact, but I'm not here today to talk about it. Instead, I'm here today to talk about elections and turnout, because I just went and voted in the 2019 United Kingdom local elections. I did a democracy today, and that means that I'm counted in the official turnout figure, which is the percentage of people who can vote who go out and choose to vote on a given day. In this particular local election, despite being one of the most important ones, because in terms of local elections, one of the biggest off-year elections or midterms, I think it's in America, it's still expected to have a turnout somewhere below 40%. And even though that's an increase over last year, it's still got the question of like, so what's the deal with that? Like, what's the deal with less than half of people who can vote showing up to vote? How do you fix it? Is the answer compulsory voting? That's something that comes up every now and then. And did you know how many countries actually use compulsory voting? It's a lot more than you might think. So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about all of that because I think it's an interesting subject and maybe you agree. And if you don't agree, then, you know, I voted. So I'm going to brag to you about, I'm going to flex a view of my democracy skills here. So yeah, let me just start off with my kind of base opinions. I've said before on this channel quite publicly, I think democracy is the best system, you know, besides all, it's the worst system besides all others that have been tried. It's the best system that we have. And although I don't think you require democracy to be a functioning good country, it generally is a useful component. It's a good sign for a country to have. So yeah, with that said, again, I'm not like, I like democracy, but I'm not like I would die for democracy. At least I don't think that's my opinion. So let's now talk about the kind of well-known phenomenon. Every other YouTube video you ever watch on democracy is going to start by saying, whatever you do, go out and vote. Or like, is there a valid reason to vote? And they're going to finagle themselves to try and get to the no answer. Because generally speaking, that's just the widely held opinion. It's a good thing to promote people to vote. And if you are in the UK, please do vote. It's probably good for it's good for yourself and is generally better for the system. However, I would say that it shouldn't be just a given that everyone voting is good, because here's the deal, right? And elections are a zero-sum game. Unlike a lot of things where the more people put in, like economics and a lot of other systems we live in, where the more people contribute, the more people who care about system, the better it gets for everyone, not just the less goes around for everyone. When it comes to elections, it is literally a zero-sum game. Every person who votes in an election, additionally, depowers your vote by one. So in the UK, the general elections, the ones where we have everyone vote for one, big election, even though it's for your local council, but ignore that. Like when we have one big UK-wide election, which is how people see it, we get turnouts of 75%, and we get something like 30 million people voting. If 30 million people vote, your vote is 1/30 millionth of the total. If 30,000 people vote, if we got 0.1% of the turnout next time, which would be tragic, like democracy ending levels, then your vote would be worth 1/30,000. So yeah, basically, if only half as many people vote, your vote is worth double as much. Your vote is only worth as much as other people are in that same election. When you vote in India and there's a billion other people in the country, it's worth less than when you vote in, Luxembourg and there's less than 1 million people in the country. So yeah, now that that's out of the way, that's a key thing. I don't think that it's just a given, and I've never thought this since before I could even vote, that you should just vote in an election because, oh yeah, everyone's saying it's Democracy Day, go and vote. I think that you should always vote if you have a strong stake or a strong opinion, or even if you're just like, it feels good, like, oh yeah, I helped the system out. Because voting is fundamentally a right and not a responsibility. It's a privilege and not a thing you have to do. A thing you get to do, not a thing you're forced to do. And therefore, by telling everyone like, oh, you have to do it, we're kind of creating a peer pressure net that kind of forces it from one to the other. And although we're going to talk about actually legally forcing it from one to the other, basically, I don't think increasing turnout is a given, because the lower the turnout gets in an election, generally the more like coverage that gets, like what's the deal with this? And we generally have a system that balances, where it rarely gets to the stage where there's a tiny, like 1% or 0.1% voting, like I said, the levels where things get dangerous. Instead, we just have more or less people care about voting in any given year, and we should get people caring about voting before elections. We shouldn't get people being like, hey, tomorrow there's an election, I don't care if you haven't done any research, you don't know the news, you don't know the policies, go out and vote based on, your disposed biases, which, if we're being honest, because I'm telling you to vote, probably came from me, right? That's how things seem to mostly be. I think the interesting thing about turnout is the lower it gets to, the more popular fringe beliefs can be. Because in a system where you have 100% turnout, the views of the people are the views of the government. Again, assuming you trust that party system to translate. The views, a democracy with 100% turnout is where the views of the people are what are voted on, whereas in a democracy with like less than 50% turnout, you generally get a system where the views of those most willing to vote are those represented by the extreme. And that's already to some extent how it is with the regular election system, because people who are, there's a lot of people who can't vote, like if you legally don't live here, if you, for instance, there's a bunch of disabilities where you can't understand or you physically can't vote. There's people who are underage, people who are, there's a few situations where you can't vote in the UK, but by and large, everyone can vote, but only, some percentage, 40% in the local elections choose to vote. And the reason that's such an interesting statistic is because it means that the lower that percentage gets, the less popular fringe beliefs need to be to get into power. Because then so again, whatever the fringe belief is, whether that's, it could literally be like, communism on the left side, or it could be full-scale libertarianism. Both of those beliefs will never be popular with 50% of the population, unless these, for a communist to get into power, they need to move I think it's called the Overton window, or just the political spectrum, such so that that can make sense where 50% of people are going to believe in communism, which it generally never happens. Generally, I don't think there's been, with very, very few exceptions, like proper elections where people are just, 50% of the actual population have decided, I think we should replace this system with a bit of communism. It's not a thing that happens, right? Or same with a lot of other systems, but it's the same on the far right. There are very few far right, or just like populist right parties in power, right? It's a thing that is very hard to get people to do. Whereas the lower turnout gets, the easier it is for these beliefs to get into power, because the less people who are voting, the more angry. Because think of it this way: the way democracy works is everyone's worth one vote. The way a democracy where 1 in every 3 people votes is your vote is worth 3 times as much if you go out to vote. If you have a pretty moderate general belief that you think everyone shares, you might not go out and vote. If you have a belief for one of these extreme positions, you're way more likely to vote. This is a thing, this is actually the strategy behind the elections of people like Donald Trump or Jeremy Corbyn. Their goal is not to get half the population on their side. In fact, neither of them did, right? It's just a fact. Their goal is to get a significant portion, maybe a third, and then get that third riled up and try and guarantee they'll vote. And that's why you say things like the elections are fake. That's why all these crazy quotes come out, not because they believe them, not because they believe that, oh yeah, there really is some vote rigging and illegality. You say it because you want your side riled up, and the further the extremes this gets, the easier it is, it seems, at least again in political discourse in the West in 2019, it is to do. So yeah, lower turnout is not an inherently good thing. If you have an extreme belief right now, or even if you just believe extreme beliefs should be listened to more than they are right now, i.e., kind of very little, right? How many, how many far left or far right MPs do we have in Parliament? Not as many as we have people who believe in those things. You might believe that that's one of the easiest ways to get those opinions represented, and that's the reason to want it. So if you want, I would say, moderate beliefs, if you want, beliefs that are in that main part of the spectrum where most people lie, then having more people vote is what is your thing. And if you want beliefs on the further out, then having people not vote, go on a campaign in your school, be like, hey, voting sucks. It's probably rigged anyway, and that is actually useful to your cause. I don't think it's good for our political system, but it is I would say, the game theory kind of answer on this one. So next up, let's talk about compulsory voting a little bit, because if you want to get 100% of people to vote, like a lot of countries do, or even just a lot of people to vote, so that democracy represents the people, not the people who are most angry, then how exactly do you do that? How does compulsory voting work? It can't be a real thing. You can't force people to vote. Like, you're going to put a gun to their heads, and no, generally speaking, compulsory voting, as it is in most countries, North Korea is a fun exception. So compulsory voting is a system where, like, you get a fine for not voting. That can be like 22 liras in Turkey. It can be, I think it's like 5 or 10 Australian dollars in Australia. There's a lot of countries where there's compulsory voting, and it's enforced by fines. So even though they have compulsory voting, where you legally have to vote, they don't get 100% turnout. They don't even get 99 or 98. It's like high 90s% turnout. And yeah, there's a lot of countries, surprisingly, that did this, that do this, and or did this. So there are a few countries that have it but don't really use it. Like in Bulgaria, you legally have to vote, but also, like, it's just the law, you know? In the same way that you can legally pee in a policeman's helmet in the UK, but it's just the law. Probably shouldn't try and do that if you're pregnant, by the way. Fun fact, because if you're pregnant, you don't want to indecently expose yourself, put a helmet down there. There we go. Fun fact of Toy Cat, midway through democracy. But yeah, there are actually a few countries who do enforce it, who will fine you if you do not vote. And it's, the list is really interesting, because you see countries on there that are as kind of worrying as Brazil and North Korea. Brazil and North Korea, you have to vote in both. In North Korea, you only get one choice, but you have to do it. You legally have to go there. It's kind of their equivalent of a census, but still, it's voting. Once you turn 17, 17, you go and vote at the polling station, or it's North Korea. Work out what's going to happen to you. Same with Brazil. And interestingly enough, it's also the same, though, for way more successful countries like, Luxembourg or Singapore or Australia, like I just mentioned. And yeah, all of these countries have really interesting... Again, it shows how the system doesn't necessarily guarantee good or bad governance, but you do see how it happens on both ends there. And it seems to me, again, looking at all of those countries, generally speaking, what it kind of guarantees is it just guarantees that democracy won't fall. Like, all of those countries, besides maybe Brazil, like, they have some concerning things that happen, but you're never like, oh yeah, that democracy was all lies and this and that. It generally seems to be more stable, again, just based on the examples we have. So, yeah, basically, compulsory voting. Is it a good idea? I would say yes on the level of, oh yeah, you get government to represent the people. No on the level of, well, then it means that all these slightly more fringe beliefs can never really be properly represented in, like they can never become full main swing, which means they're maybe even encouraged to do, because so many communists do believe like, oh yeah, we can never take power in elections. That's why we have violent revolutions and we kill people for the economic, and it's like, whoa there. This is elections here we're doing. There's no killing people at my local polling station. But you get the point, like that's why these things tend to happen. That's one of the downsides. One of the downsides is you take something that is a right. One of the beauties of living in the West is that you have the right to decide on your government. You make a very small impact, mathematically speaking, but you can protest, and if enough people do, you kick them out every 5 years in the UK, sometimes even more frequently than that, every 4 years in some countries. You can kick out your government when you don't like them, and that's a power you have. It's not a responsibility. When you're forced to vote, it almost forces the thing the other way around. Like, you have to vote for someone, we'd like for you to vote for us. And even though you can legally go to the polling station and deface your ballot and do a few things, you just have to show up. It in reality means that you have more people forced to do a thing that is otherwise a privilege. Like, is it worth though? Like, if you think about it, there are so many other privileges that we turned into like forced ones. For instance, school used to be like this great thing, like, oh yeah, send your kids somewhere, get them educated, that would be amazing. Then we made schools compulsory. In Germany, you literally can't homeschool your kid. They have to go to either a state or a private school. Like, we took something that was like a joy, we made it compulsory, and people don't enjoy school, right? If you're in school right now, some percentage of you watching this are, like, isn't school bad? If it was optional, you might not go, but if you did go, you'd like it more, right? Same with driving. Driving isn't forced, but like, if we force driving, like, you have to learn to drive at 17, you have to have a car by age 21, or, government comes around, they fine you. It's the sort of thing where, like, you would look at that and you'd be concerned, right? You would something that becomes a act of freedom. Driving a car is, especially in America, big point of freedom. It would turn that freedom into a chore. And do we want to do that voting? Really depends on what you think the role of voting is, and also how fragile you think our election system is. I would say the UK, again, not to toot our own trumpet here, but we've had several hundred years of successive democratic elections, and even though there are election results I don't like of the past 3, I liked one of the last 3 elections. You work out which one it is. Go back and mathematically speak it. But yeah, there's only really been of the last several elections, there have been some very questionable results. But the truth is, they're still democratic. They still involve the systems being followed, and the systems are followed, even if only 60% of people are voting. That's the thing that tends to happen. When voting gets too low, things get concerning, but in the local elections, it's not really a problem. Like, we tend to get pretty normal results. In the EU elections, I mean, does it really matter? I mean, most people don't believe the EU Parliament can't really propose legislation, so removes one of their biggest powers over people. And yeah, basically, in elections of low turnout, it's probably problematic when you're voting over things of high stakes, but otherwise, I guess the easy way to do this thing is just be like, hey, encourage people to engage in the political system, because I think just encouraging people to vote is just as bad as forcing people to vote, or just as bad as having people not vote. I think all the people who every election, because this is going to happen in, 18 months on the internet, people are going to be like, go vote. And it's like, no, now, if you care about 2020, learn about the political system, what the powers of the president, the Congress, all the people you might be voting on now. Don't wait till a day before till you see a YouTuber or tweet saying, go vote and do it, because that's also just as bad for democracy, in my opinion. And I'm always... I think I know, half of people who say go vote must be like, oh yeah, this is a pretty sincere opinion. But I think half of people who go out, who say oh yeah, go vote, know what they're doing, right? When you the sorts of people who don't care about voting, because generally speaking, in our current system, in the left-right dichotomy, older people tend to be more right-wing, younger people tend to be more left-wing. Younger people tend to vote less; they're more apathetic. Right, your older people, they tend to vote a lot more. It's probably because of the fact that, again, turnout's been dropping, because it's the young people as they age, they keep their lack of voting with them for the most part. So because older people vote, their opinions are represented more, and it's a way of saying, oh yeah, let's have that opinion represented less, which might sound fair on that level, but it's also kind of for like, oh yeah, well, I believe in my beliefs here, and I'd like people who also believe in these to go out and vote. Like, by increasing the number of people voting, especially online in Twitter, where, what's the average age for Twitter use? It's in the 20s, right? Maybe even a teenager. By increasing the percentage for of these people voting, people know what they're doing, and that's fine. Like, it's okay to espouse support for a political candidate. I don't do it on this channel, and it's not a thing I'm particularly interested in doing. That's why I never mentioned who I voted for, but I will say different people for different jobs, because that's a thing that you can do if you want to. Parties are not the thing you have to use to define yourself. But yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say in today's video. Just, it's fine to it's fine to try and encourage your political beliefs over other ones if you're transparent about doing so. And then like saying, oh no, this is really me just saying more people should vote because democracy is good for everyone. So a lot of people who are saying that are definitely not being very sincere, and it's always bothered me, and that's why I made a video that's 16 minutes and 30 seconds long talking about it. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed the very interesting background. If you did, you can, I don't know, it's the second channel, I don't care. You can go do whatever you want. Look, it's blue, but there's also blue there, because it's a blue screen. I can even make the green screen green if I want to. Is this a real green screen? Why is my shirt changing color? It's crazy. So I really have fun with this. But yeah, no, thank you very much for watching today's video. Wait one sec. Let's put this, no, wait, okay, this is terrible. But yeah, thank you very much for watching today's video. Go vote if you live in the UK, or don't. That's my point here, really. Like, forcing people to vote is, wait, no, I did have one more point, and that is, if you make voting compulsory, then it makes it harder to expand voting. Over time, we've historically expanded categories of people who can vote, and although I don't personally think that 16 and 17-year-old voting is, I'm not like hugely in favor of it, I'm not hugely against it either. It's kind of like, oh yeah, that seems like a thing that, given how young people don't vote anyway, it seems like an unnecessary additional thing. Changes like that are a lot harder to make, because if you have compulsory voting, having 16 and 17-year-olds vote, for instance, that would make it so that that would make it for them a chore. Like, they don't want to be able to vote because they have to vote. It's the same way that in I want to say it's Luxembourg, you can register to vote, but once you register to vote, you legally then have to vote. So a lot of people, Portuguese immigrants, for instance, might choose not to register to vote because then you don't have to. So I don't know. Fun fact, it's Toycat. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Hope you all enjoy the moon, where there are no elections yet. Maybe we should campaign for democracy there in the future. But yeah, as always, second channel, don't care. Goodbye.